Hi, everyone. I'd like to take a few minutes to talk to you about my new fantasy novel, The Orbstars of T'varin. More specifically, to speak to you about the dedication I wrote at the beginning of the book. The story is dedicated to Dave Gallant, and I realize not many people, with the exception of perhaps a few family members and friends who knew him, would have a clue about who Dave Gallant is. So let me tell you about Dave, or David Gallant, as the dedication says. I first met Dave in the late 1980s when I was working as a counselor for people with mental health or addiction issues who stayed at the shelter run by Mission Services of London in London, Ontario. It was around that same time that I actually had started writing the first draft of the Orbstars of T'varin. Dave was one of those revolving door clients who would show up and stay for a while and then take off again. He would start doing well and seem to self-sabotage, and then he was gone, traveling across the provinces or at times even the country. As I got to know him through our chats as he came back and forth, I found out that he struggled with some mental health and some addiction issues, more so the latter than the former. He was originally from the Canadian province of Prince Edward Island, but he'd not been home in a long time. He did not know who his father was, and he had not spoken or contacted his mother in years. We got used to Dave's comings and goings at the shelter, until during one of his stays, something happened. Dave explained that he had converted to the Christian faith, and was doing much better since he had come to faith in Christ. It really showed. Dave seemed to stabilize well, no longer using drugs, and became an active member and volunteer at the mission, taking on everything from cleaning duties to helping with the food pantry. The food pantry itself existed long before the larger London Food Bank had its start, and Dave kept busy accepting donations, organizing everything, including deliveries and handing out food packages to those in need. He was really finding himself fulfilled by this work. And he really did have great organizational skills. A few other things you should know about Dave Gallant, aside from that. He could recite the theme songs from 50s, 60s, and 70s shows at the drop of a hat. Anything from Andy Griffith to the Brady Bunch, Partridge Family, and beyond. Dave was also a bit of a hypochondriac, and when his food-related duties were done, it was not unusual to see him wiping down doorknobs and light switches and anything else in the 72-bed shelter that might have germs, while he hummed or sang his favorite TV show themes. He would have been great during COVID. Eventually, some government funding was offered to support the position at the mission's food bank, and I recommended to senior staff that since Dave was doing so well, we should consider hiring him for the position. He was successful, and now Dave had moved from being a client to being a coworker. This meant Dave had enough income to look for a subsidized apartment so he could move out of the mission and live independently. We were able to work together to find him one that was a bachelor apartment in a building just one street over from the mission itself. Dave was now living on his own with a full-time job and doing well. So well that I no longer needed to provide him with the counseling support sessions. And over time, our relationship morphed from more of a friendship into more of a friendship than just a coworker. He got to know our family, and we tried to include him in special events like Thanksgiving and Christmas whenever possible, at least to give him some sense of family since his mom was so far away. Although sometimes Dave's lack of social skills, perhaps an after effect of some of the drug use, manifested in odd ways. For example, he had started taking Aikido lessons and was excited to show us some of the moves he learned. That was fine, other than he did it on the floor of the restaurant where we brought him along to enjoy dinner with us. Hard to forget that scene for sure. I mentioned Dave being a hypochondriac, but there was one incident that occurred where his concern was justified. He woke up one morning in his apartment to find blood all over his pillow. Immediately checking with the doctor, he was referred to a specialist for follow-up. In the meantime, it was suggested that it would be best if he could stay with friends for the upcoming weekend, which he did. He came and stayed with us, and thankfully there were no incidents. Now he just needed to wait for the MRI and results from those scans, but nothing was evident from them. He was to let his healthcare providers know if anything like that would happen again, and for sure he would with his hypochondria. In December 1993, Dave accomplished another first. He had saved up enough money from his job to visit his mom in PEI over Christmas. They had a wonderful 2 weeks together before he returned to tell us all about the great trip and how good it was to spend that time reconnecting with his mother. In early January, David asked about getting together over the weekend to hang out and catch up, so we planned to do that. However, he called on the Friday to say he felt like he was getting a cold or the flu and didn't want to pass anything on, so we decided to postpone. On the following Monday, Dave did not show up for work, which was very unusual. He didn't respond to phone calls either, nor had he called in. Knowing that he'd said he wasn't feeling well on the Friday, I thought maybe he decided to stay home and fell asleep before he had a chance to call the mission. However, not hearing anything from him by noon, I walked over to his apartment to see if I could ask the superintendent to let me in to do a knock on Dave's door. We'd also called the local police to do a wellness check to see if just in case we couldn't get in. As I arrived, so did the minister from Dave's church. He was also concerned, as Dave did not show up for the service on Sunday, and he was supposed to be reading a Bible passage for the service, and he was a very faithful attender. Coincidentally, at the same time as the minister arrived, just after that, so did the superintendent and the police officer. The superintendent let us in, and we found Dave lying on the floor in the hallway just before his door. He had an aneurysm sometime over the weekend and had died. With his mom so far away, I had the task, accompanied by another close friend, to identify Dave's body in the morgue, as well as eventually speaking with his mom. She told me Dave talked about me repeatedly during his visit, referring to me as his best friend in the whole world. Honestly, I had no idea that's how he thought of me. There is a lot more I could say about Dave and his chapter in my life. For all his quirky behaviors and challenges, it definitely made our time with him an adventure, and his faith in Jesus really did significantly change his life for the better. He found home in his church, at times with our family, and again in PI, where he reconnected with his mom over Christmas. I'm so thankful he had that opportunity to do that before he died. There is a lesson from Dave's life for me, perhaps for all of us. Some things to remember Dave's life reminds us of. Life is short. Dave died at 31 years of age. Eternity is long. He gets to experience that now. And faith in Jesus can still transform lives. Dave was living proof of that. That is why the dedication in the Orbstars of T'varin reads, dedicated to the memory of David Joseph Gallant. Born August 7th, 1963, died January 1994. A dear friend and brother in the Lord. A warrior in his own right, who now walks in T'var's land and beholds him face to face. If you haven't picked up your copy of the Orbstars of T'varin yet, maybe it's time to do so. And as you read it, perhaps once in a while, think of Dave Gallant, his and your own battles, and the lessons both Dave's life and Orbstars can teach us. For even in the darkest of places, or during that dark night of the soul, even through death's doorway itself, T'var's light still shines. Thanks for listening. I'll leave some links in the comments where you can find the Orbstars of T'varin. I hope you will read it and enjoy it, and think about Dave Gallant as you do. Take care, everybody.